Hey everybody, this is Petey from the Spinner Rack, and today I'm doing a video on Mike Mignola drawing monsters, the secret origin of Hellboy. I just did obviously the review of the latest Hellboy movie, The Crooked Man, and since I was on Amazon and I saw this, I finally got to check it out. Now, as I pointed out, I don't know how many times I have to bring up some of the Hellboy stuff I have here. I did a video somewhere about it, but I guess none of these are directly Mignola stuff. But it says drawing monsters, right? So ultimately, we have his book, Baltimore here. His other book, Joe Golem, and the Drowning City. So obviously, I'm a big fan. I've shown you the action figures, but I watched this. I liked the documentary. It was very interesting. I think they could have got a little more bits in there. And basically, as my recommend is, I recommend it to you. I definitely recommend it to you. I say check it out. We'll watch the trailer, and then I'll add in some tidbits that well, I've read in different magazines. I got a whole pile of interviews from Mike Mignola because I was a big fan. Ready, set.
Who is Hellboy?
What's Hellboy about?
Hellboy.
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 Hellboy was always meant to be my thing that I get to draw. Now, I just can't seem to stop it. I had a vague idea that someday I would draw monsters for a living. Marvel was publishing so much back then. I was taking whatever jobs I could get, and I was not very good. I'm not cut out to draw superheroes. I couldn't work for Marvel anymore, and so I just left. I don't know how to draw cars, but I can draw cemeteries and spooky stuff. I thought, I want to do more stuff like that. I just needed the main character. I went in the studio and I came out later and said, I figured it out, and it's Hellboy. Dark Horse approached me about optioning it for a film. I thought, nobody's ever going to make a Hellboy movie. There was a part of me that said, it's going to be terrible. I'll never be able to touch Hellboy again. Del Toro had a vision for what he wanted to do. There was no shaking that.
You're confusing design.
You're confusing movie. Oh!
Mike hated certain things.
I said, Hellboy wouldn't do that. And he said, your Hellboy wouldn't. Mine would. That changed everything.
It's not like we altered the comic.
The Hellboy movies that he made were amazing. That, to me, is the essence of Mignola and Hellboy right there.
Nobody can do what he does.
He really touches something about the deepest, most seminal parts of the human condition.
He sings with his visuals with a voice that you've never heard before.
I built the Hellboy machine.
And he wants to share that with the world. It all began with just guys sitting down and just working on the book. And then it became, this.
The star comes directly from Mike Mignola.
The problem with the greats is we take them for granted.
I just wanted to draw monsters for a living.
All right, so it's out. It's already out, so you can check it out on
Is we take them for granted.
Amazon. And I think one of the things that this documentary doesn't convey is this: yes, it gives you the origins of how Mignola kind of was developing his style. But there's some more interesting bits that we could put in there. So I'm just at Thailand. I'm definitely saying recommend it. If you don't know anything about Mike Mignola, go definitely check it out. But watch that first, and come back and watch this video. Because for the Hellboy movie, I kind of didn't want to spoil anything, because I definitely want people to go check that out. But for this, I'll just add some tidbits that aren't in here. Is that one of the interesting things in one of the interviews that Mike Mignola was saying, he was talking about, everyone knows the editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter, and he was struggling with Mike Mignola's lighting. Like I think the quote was, Shooter was struggling with having solid black in the foreground and in the background, and stuff that you don't do in comic books, but not being able to see that he was kind of coming up with something new, like in some of the things that he was doing. So it would have been interesting to kind of hear a little more of the inside Marvel stuff. So there was that bit. How much bits can I give you? It's not going to be any kind of story form, but ultimately one of the other things is that Mike Mignola, you can see it when they talk about, from the peers that are in this book and where they talk about his art. In the late 80s, he was definitely an artist. They definitely give you the image that's in his head of his art and his struggles as a penciler and struggles with his style, but he was, getting calls from Byrne to do Superman. He did The World of Krypton, Howard Chaykin. He did, I think I have that here somewhere. Yeah. With Howard Chaykin, he did this Iron Wolf, and Howard Chaykin is definitely one of the rougher critics of comic books. I think there's another book, this is Farad and the Grey Mouser, that he did. So he was slowly becoming this artist. Byrne also had him do, I think, an issue of Superman, Return to Krypton, and then Roger Stern worked with him on another issue with the Silver Banshee on Superman. Then Walter Simonson had him doing a Wolverine prestige format, which I don't have here. And at the same time, the people who were revolutionizing comic books, which would be Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, who else? Definitely Mark Silvestri. They were especially those three, they were big Mike Mignola fans. And you could see definitely in Silvestri some of the lighting and the shading and even the placement of the rocks over the feet. And Rob Liefeld's feet are actually Mignola's feet. The feet that you can see sometimes in Rob Liefeld's work, you can see is Mignola's stuff. So they were kind of grabbing some of the stuff they thought was cool. And there's also Joe Quesada, who was very much influenced by Mike. And when they talked, like Mike Mignola turned to Quesada and said, take out some of these unnecessary lines. You don't need all these lines in this. And Quesada turned to Mignola and said, no, I'm doing a commercial Mignola style. So to his peers, he was very much an artist. They definitely were seeing what he was doing and liking it. So that's the only thing that really doesn't come in here. It gives you the struggling artist and getting up the bat and hitting a home run with Hellboy. But I wanted to give you the other angle of that, because he also talks, he said in this, you see, they talk about saying he just left Marvel. That was another very interesting story, because to talk about where he came from, inking Defenders and struggling, and then to go to, what would they be, the book? X-Force. So he was doing he was doing a fill-in for X-Force. It was over Rob Liefeld's breakdowns or layouts. So that's the craziest thing that you could ever have. But Rob Liefeld probably also doing the plot via sending in these layouts of his art. So, and Mike Mignola doing over, I think it's X-Force 8. And at that period, I think Mike Mignola hadn't had plans. They talk about, what's that thing? Cosmic Odyssey, which got him some notoriety in comic books. They didn't really talk about Gotham by Gaslight, but they do show it. But in one of the interviews with Gotham by Gaslight, I think he was talking with Brian Augustine about it, and they were talking And he was like, no, he didn't want to do it because he knew would take a lot of research. So there was a lot of negativity towards the idea. But as he was thinking about it, he started to kind of talk himself into doing Gotham by Gaslight. And then it became the book that people remember, that they've done statues of, action figures of. Oh man, yeah, that I had the Todd McFarlane, Todd Toys, what's that thing? Gotham by Gaslight action figure. I actually had that. That's crazy, man. So he's very much against doing a lot of research, but obviously he used a ton of it. Now, for my personal thing, I was very much a fan of his stuff, especially when I first saw it in Alpha Flight, those covers. The inking on the inside, which was a lot rougher and a lot more textured in comparison to how it's like, it wasn't necessarily Frazetta, but it was like a comic book Frazetta covers that he was doing for the Alpha Flight. So it was like Byrne left, and then we have these kind of Frazetta-like covers on Alpha Flight with the whatever the action's right in the middle, sort of like a weird or eerie cover, that sort of thing, or a novel done by Frazetta. But it was like kind of a superhero style with a lot of black, solid black in it. And at that point, I didn't really know anything about art, but I did like when Byrne or Neil Adams or anyone used like solid black. So as a fan, I was checking his stuff out. But then when I saw the thing he did, it was in a Spider-Man book. They showed a couple pictures of it where he did a very muscular Peter Parker, which Peter Parker was muscular at that time, but it was very cool. So I was just like, why did he kind of drift from this like Frazetta figure that's Frazetta mixed with some Wrightson figure that he has? Like, this is a great figure. He could have done this style for any superhero, because I was a big superhero thing. But I was still following him. But by the time Gotham by Gaslight came along, I was kind of like, I liked it, but then at the same time, he would do straightforward storytelling. Like, he would not veer off of the storytelling. He wouldn't go for the big shots, the Kirby type of stuff. He would do, definitely whatever was necessary for the story in the panels. And at that point, people were going bigger, using those splash pages all the time. And Mignola was just really concentrating on doing the art. He did with Byrne. He did do a lot of splash pages in that, and that was a lot of big. I've done that before, but I didn't talk about me liking the art. I was struggling with the inking on that, but I that was a little broader. But I guess we can get into that too. With Byrne, who was it? Well, Byrne would give him the plot over the phone, so he obviously trusted his skills. He called them up, and that was the reason why Byrne became the scripter of Hellboy, because he had a very loose kind of relationship with him. He just kind of, that idea, just giving him a plot over the phone or calling up saying, hey, I got Action Comics 600. What do you want to draw? And he said, oh, I want to draw Man-Bat. So then he came with a story where Superman goes into a cave and he's struggling with kryptonite poisoning, and he's hallucinating. And Man-Bat, who's kind of like, hey, Superman, in his mind, he's seeing Man-Bat as a monster. So they had like a kind of a, like having Byrne kind of just giving the plot on the phone gave a trust to Mignola, right? So going back to I backtracked, I talked about stuff that wasn't talked about there. Talked about the Alpha Flight. They did talk about the Hulk, but when he was doing X-Force, he had a crossover annuals planned with Arthur Adams, where he was going to draw one, then Arthur Adams was going to draw one. X-Men was a Fantastic Four, Cable, and Wolverine crossover within the annuals, like a 2-annual thing that he was, working with Bob Harris. But at the same time, Bob Harris on X-Force, the issue 8, Mike Mignola had done, he was asking about the cover. And he said, well, wait, let's wait on the cover. And then Mike Mignola found out that they were waiting on a Rob cover because Rob was doing Youngblood. And he was like, what? Like, you guys will wait? You won't just tell me no or something like that for the X-Force cover? And Rob is gone. He's never coming back. Those are his words. Rob is never coming back. He's gone. And that's what led him to leave Marvel, and the Batman story they talked about. They didn't talk about, which I have here. Do I have it here? I had it somewhere over here. Dracula. So Dracula was another thing. And that's another situation where he was doing with he was working on Dracula with Roy Thomas. It was, I gotta have that here somewhere. Yeah, I do have that here. I had sorry guys. I'm supposed to change my shirt. All right. So we have this adaptation of Dracula, right? This is the new edition. It's the black and white edition of Dracula, right? So this right here, this doesn't have, does this have the, let's go straight to it. It's one of the things where you get the new volume, which is a lot sexier than the old volume. But at the same time, some of the stuff that's missing is that originally this had a foreword by Roman Coppola, obviously the relative of Francis Ford Coppola. Roman was working on this Dracula film, and he wanted the comic book to come out so much like the movie. So he was constantly sending Roy Thomas stills and stuff and script. And then as they were working on it, they ran into an impasse and they were struggling with the story. So Roman says, hey, Mike, can you come over? And he was in no way involved in the film at that point. So they call him over, and he's in a room with, I think, George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and Roman Coppola, and they're arguing about the film, and they're struggling with it. And then they realize they need to do an opening sequence. So since Mike is there, they asked Mike to kind of draw it out, not in the storyboard type. He just did a basic comic page of that opening scene, just to set up what they would see. And that was ultimate. So when he went to the movies, he saw it, and he was like, they used the layout I used for the whole thing and the outfit. And it was like, so this must not be a very professional movie if I'm involved in it. So he gets credited in the end with Neil Adams and, was it Neil Adams? With Neil Adams and Steranko. So he gets credited. So that's another bit I think would be interesting. So at this point, he's got that stuff happening. They do talk about him going to Michael Richardson and going to Dark Horse to do Hellboy. Now, the behind the scenes, they talk about it like he did it. It wasn't a success, but he kept doing it till it was a success. Now, and he had doubts and all this stuff. And I'm going to say it's partially true. Now, obviously, you could trust me or Mignola. I would think you'd trust Mignola. I'm just going to go by the interviews that I have, that I've read. I didn't talk to anybody. I was going left. That was going very left, right? So at this period, I already talked about the Image thing happening, right? So the Image guy's leaving. At the same time the Image guys left, a lot of the creators, now Rob says that the top creators were already kind of piling together trying to do a group thing, which was originally called Dinosaur, that kind of fell apart. but they were thinking about trying to do this group thing where they were trying to figure things out. And it was like Frank Miller and Arthur Adams, Walter Simonson, Chaikin, all these people were kind of trying to figure out what they were going to do next. One of the, I said Frank Miller, one of the late people to the party was John Byrne, where John Byrne said, they called him up and said, hey, John, we're doing this thing and we would feel bad if we didn't tell you. So that's how he got involved. And then when Byrne, what did Byrne do after that point? It fell apart, right? So Byrne and Frank Miller said, hey, we should just make ourselves the bosses, put it together, and go to Dark Horse. And Frank agreed. The people that were left, because a portion of that group became Bravura. There was Walter Simonson, Chaikin, Gil Kane. There's a bunch of other people with Bravura, right? Norm Britt. It might have been more added afterwards. But anyway, on the Legend side, I've talked about the Legend group a lot. So it's Frank Miller, John Byrne, Arthur Adams. We had Paul Chadwick, who Byrne felt should be in there because he was fighting a good fight, doing left Marvel, doing independent comic books at Dark Horse. We had Dave Gibbons, from obviously Watchmen fame, and Jeff Darrow. Is that all of them? Yeah, I believe that's pretty much all of them. And then they added like 3 more. They added Walter Simonson, Gary Gianni, Bruce Timm, and Mike Allred. Right? I think those are the original plan, but ain't no people they added. But in this thing, they went to Dark Horse saying they were going to do the Legend thing, and everyone was putting up their books. Miller was going to continue Sin City. Byrne was going to continue the books that he had, the book he had, which was the Next Men, but he was also going to add in Danger Unlimited. Paul Chadwick was going to continue doing Concrete, but at the same time, when doing Concrete, he was going to do a little more action-packed storyline. Obviously, we had the Big Guy and Rusty the Boy Robot by Miller and Miller and Jeff Darrow. We had Martha Washington by Frank Miller and Dave Gibbons. And did I cover everyone there? Arthur Adams was going to do Monkey Man and O'Brien. But this is the key of bringing up all this stuff. Mike Mignola had a plan. So he's like, all right, I'm with all this established talent. And as he felt, he was kind of the lesser known of these talents, but they considered him one of the heavyweights, right? A talent amongst them, right? So his idea was, I'm going to be with these guys. I'm going to put up my book, my Hellboy, and this could garner some success being with this group, right? So that was the first plan. Then the second plan was, all right, I'm not really keen on writing. That's what he said. He said this in the doc a few times. But at the same time, he was like, I'll get John Byrne to write it. So I got this plot that I want to do, but at the same time, I'll let Byrne write it. Our relationship is kind of decent, and he probably won't take it from me. It'll probably still be mine, And Byrne, in seeing the stuff, he said, oh yeah, fine. But then when he started seeing the stuff that Mignola was giving him, he was like, hey, all these copious notes, like the stuff on the sidelines, or the mock dialogue that you have here, you just put that in the word balloons. So Byrne was kind of seeing that he, he did add sort of a internal monologue, kind of like a detective type thing, because there is some elements of the story that's slowly unfolding. But as I talked about this before, that ultimately, from a point later, he was thinking of doing it his own. And Byrne was also saying, hey, by the end of the 4th issue, he'll probably be doing it on his own. So he was thinking, but having Byrne there was, a safety net, even though Byrne wasn't as tough as, say, Chaikin was to some of the other creators at Bravura. So Byrne was just kind of taking what he did. He only pointed out that Byrne would say to him that that Hellboy is hot stuff from Harvey Comics grown up, Like, and he was like, because Byrne was a big fan of hot stuff, and he was like saying Mike Mignola was kind of doing hot stuff growing up. But it's just to Mignola. He only said that, I think, on a blog like years, and I think everyone's forgotten except for me. So anyway, as that went along, his second plan was this. Him and Arthur Adams, they're buddies. They show that in the story. Definitely check it out. There's a ton of tidbits. All I'm saying, tidbits that you will not see in this story. All other tidbits that I didn't know that are great to watch. He's like, all right, so I'm going to do a book. I'll do the lead. Arthur Adams will do the backup. And at the same time, Arthur Adams will do a mini. I'll do a backup. Right? So that was the plan. So that was a focused plan to how to success. Be with this group, get Byrne to script it, and he probably won't take it over. And at the same time, it will be a dual book. It'll be like the Tales of Suspense, where we got me and Arthur Adams. We're both slow. So then I'm done with my miniseries. I'm doing backup issues. And then, backup stories, 8-pagers, and put in there, and we'll just swap off. And Dark Horse was for it. And Mike Mignola did the first miniseries. It was not a success, as they said, but at the same time, Dark Horse always had a plan for repackaging and putting stuff in the bookstores and or the comic book shelves as trade paperbacks. So where it what they didn't mention is that it kind of got life in the trade. So when you had it in the trade, and DC was slowly experimenting on the trade, Marvel would kind of, flood the market. But Hellboy kind of found his life in the trade paperback market. So he would do a miniseries and then go to trade. But at the same time, Arthur Adams kind of, was already enticed by all this Marvel stuff. So he did the first set of backups, and then he did maybe a couple of short stories, but he was not ready to do his mini yet. He was doing like cans for Chef Boyardee with the X-Men on it, X-Men covers, stuff for Image. So he was constantly pulled away for these hotter properties than his creator-owned stuff. So Mike Mignola was already starting on his 8-pagers, which was the Wolves of Augustine. Those stories, his short stories, started to show up in other places. Dark Horse Presents, and then at some point he did a one-shot, which they talk about, which is The Corpse and the Iron Shoes. The Iron Shoes he already had, The Corpse, something he wanted to do, and that was kind of the book that really kind of solidified Hellboy as a property. I'm not sure if it came before Wake the Devil, which was supposed to be connected to 1995, Nostradamus's prediction of the end of the world. So there was supposed to be a connection to that stuff. But The Corpse and Iron Shoes is kind of what solidified Hellboy as this thing, that it was a big thing. And for me, as a reader, my last bit on the Hellboy stuff was when I read it, and I was a fan of Mike Mignola, I didn't really when it appeared in the X-Men, that kind of said he was kind of doing a Jack Kirby kind of double splash pages. He was going to be doing some big, muscular, cool stuff in there. He wasn't going to just do great storytelling. He was going to do, and Mike Mignola's style is not just your standard storytelling. He is a clear storyteller, even though his stuff is moody. He does what, if you see, there's a Steranko Captain America, right? Where Captain America is at a amusement park, and he does all these multiple images, and that's kind of like the comic version of cross-cutting, having a bunch of multiple images in kind of a unique pattern that kind of works a way where you can read it as a story. You could read it however you want to read it, but it kind of gives you a mood. It gives you kind of a pacing, and it gives you the closest thing I can say to in a music video of cross-cutting in a comic page. And that's kind of what he kind of distills his, Arthur Adams has that, but he does just straightforward storytelling. Mike will kind of throw in the image. Sorry, Mike Mignola, I don't actually know him, so it's like he'll throw in an image of some gothic thing as a setup of the background, maybe in the middle or the side. He wouldn't necessarily always do standard comic storytelling. And he would do these big shots that were really nice. And Wake the Devil had a lot of those. It went a little more open, a little less no captions, less dialogue. Kind of before Jeff Loeb had kind of developed the style, I think the Image guys were kind of, what I guess the Image guys were kind of expecting to become when they were becoming writers, to kind of have these open things, not much dialogue, kind of like a movie. So Hellboy kind of had that. So I always kind of call Hellboy like Image done right. It had backstory, had all this quality art. He was hitting his deadlines. It wasn't huge latenesses. And then when he stepped away from drawing it, he had these other artists that were hitting their deadlines. So it wasn't something where you were missing a lot of stuff. So I think that's the tidbits that I have. Let me just think. Do I have anything? I think as things go closer to the present, outside of no, I don't, because I don't have any behind the scenes on why Legend fell apart. But I think at least the first 3 miniseries were Legend books. So I don't have any tidbits on that. And outside of, they give you all the tidbits on. I've forgotten that Mike Mignola was worked on Blade 2. So they give you that in this. They talk about Guillermo del Toro and Mike Mignola, their struggles and their friendship. It's mostly their friendship and their struggles, and they kind of hint on the way of the shape of water. They kind of talk a little about that. So I definitely think, I say all that to say I gave you all the tidbits I could give you that's outside of this. I don't think I have anything else outside of, Mike Mignola getting what they didn't talk about, which is Guy Davis doing the BPRD mini, which kind of just took, as Hellboy was rolling, having this kind of regular series of miniseries, and it seemed like it was pretty almost monthly. That kind of broadened the Mignola thing even more. Than it said, hey, these other books will work. We had Ryan Sook doing the first one with Christopher Golden and Mike Mignola, and then we had John Acrudi working with Mike Mignola on this. And regretfully, the only other tidbit I have is that Scott Alley, who was a longtime editor of Mike Mignola, obviously ran into some controversy, and ultimately he went from I think he started writing some certain titles, or title here too. I think maybe the Abe Sapien thing. But all of those books, when they show you the Hellboy universe, it's all as cracked up to be. Like with Mike Mignola, Duncan Fedrego, who's that? Richard Corbin. I said Guy Davis, John Acrudi, all of these. Ryan Sook, who was a Mignola clone that turned into this like semi-realistic artist. This is just like amazing, So it was also interesting because Mike Mignola kind of didn't want to do the Image thing where he had people similar to him. But then he had, I think, Matt Smith, and he also had Ryan Sook, and Duncan Fedrego does a style similar to Mike, but his angles are way different. Like he'll do up shots and down shots and that sort of thing. And Mignola upshot is kind of maybe shot of the castle, but the action is kind of, like on sticks. It's kind of like that. So no disrespect, but yeah, so I think that's about it. I think I got all the bits that I could tell you about the earlier part. Definite talent, been a huge fan of his work, and it was fun seeing that movie. I hope you guys check it out and comment, and hopefully this adds some stuff to it if you already saw it, and there's some bits. If there's something that I said that you want me to pull out the paperwork for, it'll be fun to find it. So Spinner Rack is out.